I was 14 years old, and my mom and I had been living in a 3-bedroom double-wide trailer ever since we left my dad. My mom worked a full-time job, which meant that from Monday to Friday, I would have the house for myself for about 2 hours after getting home from school and before she got home from work. I usually would spend my time on my computer or working on writing my D&D campaign. And in no time at all, my mom would be home. At least, that was when I felt comfortable in my house. That all changed though, one day when I found myself walking in on a burglary in progress. I had just gotten home from school, and when I walked into my house, everything seemed normal. I walked inside and locked the door behind me before taking my shoes off. And as I was in the process of taking off my shoes, I could have sworn I heard something come from the room where we used to store our moving boxes in the back of the trailer. At first, I assumed it was just a box or the house settling, and I didn't pay the noise any mind. But before I could even stand up from taking my shoes off, I heard it again. This time it worried me a bit, so I decided to call out to see if my mom had come home early. But when I yelled out, there was no response. Still, something felt a bit odd to me, so I decided to check the room out real quick before getting comfortable. I poked my head through the door and looked around, but from what I could tell, nothing had changed, which reassured me that I had in fact heard the house settling. After that, I went about my normal routine. I stepped into my room and put my backpack on my bed before walking back out into the kitchen for a quick snack. I reached into the cabinet and pulled out a fruit roll-up. But before I could open it, I heard another sound coming from the back room. Only this time, it was followed by something that shook me to my core. After the sound of something thumping on the ground in the room, I heard what was undoubtedly a man let out a single cough. I dropped my snack and instinctively began running through the house and toward my bedroom. I'm not sure why I chose my room instead of the front door. Maybe it was where I felt the safest. But either way, I sprinted into my bedroom, which was 2 doors down from the back room, and without hesitating, I did the only thing I could think of, just like I had seen in movies. I grabbed my wooden desk chair and propped it up against my bedroom door. It was perfect timing too, because as soon as the door was wedged shut, whoever was in my house began banging up against my bedroom door. I fell back in fear and began looking around to think of what I could do next. And that was when I came to my senses. I looked over to my window and saw my escape. I was able to open it up and push the screen out before climbing through it. And since we lived in a trailer, the window were only about 5 feet off the ground. Once I was out of the house, I quickly ran through my yard and over to my neighbor's house. It only took him a few seconds before he answered the door after I began pounding on it and screaming for help. My neighbor opened the door and I explained to him what was happening. He didn't question it at all, and as soon as he saw the panic in my face, he let me into his house and we both waited there for the police and my mom to arrive home. The police showed up about 30 minutes before my mom did, but it was still too late to catch the intruder. By the time they showed up, he had already left the house. Not before destroying it though. All 3 of the rooms appeared to be ransacked, and my mother's jewelry collection was missing. For a while, I ended up staying at my neighbor's house or a friend's house after school while I waited for my mom to get home. I just wasn't comfortable being alone in my house anymore. I will never forget the first weekend that I had the house to myself, and not for the reasons you probably think. I mean, sure, I had a massive party planned, which most likely would have just turned out to be a small hangout session with my friends, but I never reached that point in the weekend. You see, the first night that I had the house to myself, I decided to take it easy and spend most of the time cleaning for the company that I was expecting to come over the following day. I straightened up the living room and the bathroom before wiping down all the counters in the kitchen, and by the time I was finally finished, I had worked up a bit of an appetite. I decided to make myself some breakfast for dinner and began making some scrambled eggs and bacon. Then after eating, I noticed that I made a mess with the bacon grease, so once again, I wiped down the counters, which is where I made my biggest mistake. After wiping down the counter, I left the towel in the same corner that the stove was in. I didn't think anything of the situation and ended up watching a movie by myself before heading into my room and falling asleep. I don't know how long I was asleep for, but I was woken up as I began choking in my sleep. My eyes shot open and could barely see anything that was around me. My room and the rest of the house had been filled with thick, dark smoke, and by the time I had woken up, there was no telling how much I inhaled. I tried to stand, but right away could tell that I was very lightheaded. After managing to sit, I quickly dropped down to my hands and knees and began crawling across the floor underneath the smoke. Crawling on all fours, I made my way out of my bedroom and through the house towards the front door. As I passed by the kitchen, I could see the flickering flames dancing in the corner near the stove. There was nothing I could do at that point, so I just continued to crawl toward the front door. Sadly, by that point, I inhaled too much smoke, and everything around me went dark as I began to pass out. I thought I was a goner, but lucky for me, my neighbor had seen the flames from his house. He apparently busted through the door and pulled me out of the house and saved my life. I didn't wake up until I was already in the ambulance and heading toward the hospital. One of the strangest jobs I have ever had was when I was trying to be a full-time house sitter. It took me a long time to land my first job, and it started out really well. It's just too bad that it ended up being my last attempt at house sitting. What happened was, I had been trying to find a full-time job where I would be my own boss, something that everyone strives for. And as it turned out, the local Craigslist had a couple of ads for people who needed someone to watch their house for them. The ad that particularly caught my eye was one for someone who was looking for a person to watch their house for them for a 3-week period during the summer. I applied for the job, not thinking that I was going to get the position considering my lack of experience. But to my surprise, I received an email asking if I would meet the owner of the home for an interview. And within a month, I was packing my bags to spend 3 weeks watching their home. The owner told me that it would be pretty standard, and that I could watch anything I wanted on TV, and he showed me the camera system that he hooked up just so that he could make sure that I wasn't doing anything nefarious in his home. He also let me know that he had 3 siblings that lived in the area, and every now and then they would stay over, and there was a small chance that one of them would stop by. I didn't have any issues with that, and when the time came, I was very excited to start working. The first few nights that I was at the house were fine, and surprisingly enough, I was really comfortable, which was something that I was worried about. It wasn't until the 5th night in the house that I had an unexpected visitor. I was just getting some water in a pot to boil up some pasta for dinner when I heard the sound of the doorbell ringing. I made my way over to the door and called out who it is as I reached for the door handle. As I opened the door, I saw a man who appeared to be around the same age as me standing on the front step. He explained to me that he was Hal's brother. Hal owned the house. Looking back on it, I don't know if I should have taken his word on that, but since Hal told me that his family might stop by, I decided to let him in. Once we were both inside, I explained that I was making some dinner and he was welcome to join. At the time, I also sent a text to Hal, letting him know that his brother had shown up, just so that he was aware what was going on. After that, I put my phone down and finished making food, as Brian and I began to make small talk. This was when I first thought something might be off, because as we were talking, he said that he needed to run to the bathroom, and he asked me where he could find it. Now, this was weird to me because if he was Hal's brother, wouldn't he know where the bathroom was in the house, especially if he had been there before? But I brushed it off and simply told him where to go. And when he was down the hall, I began straining the pasta and heard the sound of my phone going off. I picked my phone up from the counter, and when I read the text from Hal, I almost dropped it. The text was very simple, and it read, "Check the cameras. That's not my brother. Police are on the way." My eyes widened as I realized that I was about to have dinner with a complete stranger who somehow knew how to work his way into the house. My heart began to race and my paranoia began to run rampant. I figured the safest thing for me to do would be to head into the master bedroom and lock the door behind me in hopes the police got there before anything terrible happened. Once I was in the bedroom, I locked the door and stepped over to a chair in the corner and sat down. I couldn't stop shaking my legs from all the anxiety, and that only got worse as I heard him walking through the house. It wasn't long before the footsteps began getting louder as the man got closer to the bedroom door. I had to stifle back a gasp as he began knocking and attempting to open the door. The handle began to shake as he tried to turn it, and when he was unsuccessful, I heard him let out a sigh. "Hello? Can you let me in? I want to show you something before we eat dinner," he said through the door. I didn't answer, and at that point, he began pounding at the door and yelling, "Hello? Are you in there?" Time seemed to be standing still at that point, and I had my phone in my hand and was beginning to dial 911 when I was finally relieved to see the sight of flashing red and blue lights coming through the bedroom window. The police were at the door in seconds and worked their way into the house. Once they were inside, I heard the sound of footsteps running. It was a futile effort though, and once the police had apprehended the man, they searched his pockets and found something that shocked them. Inside his right jean pocket, they found a small Ziploc baggie with 3 pills inside of it, and along with the pills in the pocket, they found multiple pieces of jewelry that are believed to have belonged to the owner. Once the pills were tested, it came back that they were roofies, and it's believed that he was going to use them to make me pass out before stealing as much as he could from the house while the owner was away.